Hey guys, this is Poohead189, and this is an updated and more informative version of a video I made a number of years ago. The reason I am making this video is because I want to give back. Yeah, I do make videos you guys like and appreciate, and I appreciate that, but you guys have been so cool and supportive to me and my channel, I figured I'd make a video that could help you become a Dragon Ball scholar in the future if you ever felt like it. So I sort of want this video to be like the gift that keeps on giving, if that makes sense. Also, quick side note, if you're subscribed to me, I want to remind you to check my community tab on my channel. I always have either news on future videos, polls, information on Dragon Ball, or just memes. Just remind you guys to look, just in case. Okay, now today we're going to talk about how to determine canon and some helpful tips when researching Dragon Ball. But I also know not everyone watching knows me, and I want to take a minute to give my credibility in this topic. And I know that sounds odd, since this isn't exactly a college dissertation and we're just talking about a manga and anime series, but this is also about research, and I want people to be able to trust me. So here it is. I am a fucking nerd loser. I am a historian and a published science fiction and fantasy author. I've been a scriptwriter for Faerun History, a YouTube channel associated with D&D's Forgotten Realms Wikipedia site. I've been a guest on D&D podcasts like the popular Dungeon Cast. I made a podcast before the pandemic where I interviewed famous sci-fi and fantasy authors, mostly for Warhammer. And a few days from the creation of this video, I'm going to be interviewed for a short story I wrote for a grimdark fantasy anthology. I've spent way too much time delving into shit that doesn't exist, or stuff that doesn't exist anymore, like historical things. You know, people often come to me and consult with me about history for their own writing or video game ideas. But what does that have to do with Dragon Ball? Absolutely nothing. But I am mentioning it because, as big of a nerd as I am for that stuff, I am a bigger one for Dragon Ball. As of the time of this recording, I am 33 years old. I was 5 years old when Dragon Ball came to the States, and I was there in '96 when it first aired in the States. And it's been my absolute favorite series ever since. I actually saw it before it was even on Toonami. I saw it on WB on Saturday mornings. I've met and spoken Japanese to Ryu Horikawa, who is the Japanese voice actor for Vegeta. I've gotten the autographs of most of the Funimation and Ocean Dub voice actors, and I drive over an hour to see every new DB movie when it releases. And I've been arguing about the series on forums, chats, and social media for over 15 years now. I treat it like I treat my other interests, meaning I treat it seriously. And so I am here to give you a comprehensive list of how to judge canon in the series at large. Now, let's finally get into the meat of the video. There are 4 tiers of canon in Dragon Ball, with a few exceptions and caveats that make it a bit less simple than we would like. The 4th and lowest tier of canon is called anime canon, which means everything that occurs in the anime. The anime is an adaptation of the original series, which is the manga. It has slight differences, it has added filler, it sometimes goes to a creative direction Toriyama did not originally envision. In fact, if you're ever on a forum or message board, anime canon tends to just be plainly called non-canon. And for the most part, that's true. Later on, I'll tell you when that doesn't count, but for now, just know that you should only use the anime as a reference or source if you've already agreed with whomever you're discussing with that you are speaking only in terms of anime. Otherwise, longtime fans might snicker at you, even if they prefer the anime to the manga. In fact, I am one of those guys. I love the manga, but I admit I like watching the anime a little bit more. However, that does not mean this rule does not count for me. It's pretty much been the consensus for my entire life. Now, that was Tier 4. Tier 3 canon, or what I like to call canon until it isn't, are the official guidebooks. Books like the Daizenshuu or the Super Exciting Guide, etc. Books that have Toriyama's seal of approval, essentially. Toriyama really did not do much work on them himself, but the creators did a good job compiling information, and even when they made best guesses, they consulted Toriyama and he signed off on them. Now, we all know Toriyama is somewhat lazy and forgetful, so it's doubtful he went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, but still, the fact he stamped his approval means they have a good bit of canonicity. Now we can say, for a certainty, that even though it's never stated in the manga, that Vegeta's power level when introduced is 18,000, because it is in the Daizenshu and nothing contradicts it. Now, this does not mean the guidebooks are flawless. If they say something that blatantly contradicts a proven statement or feats in the manga, the guidebook would be superseded. But generally, it's a good source for canon information. Okay, now into Tier 2. The second highest tier of canon is the big man himself, Toriyama, and all of his interviews and statements. As the creator of the series, obviously he has an immense weight on what is or is not true in his series. Even though he is known as not always being the most knowledgeable of the thing he created, his interviews are pivotal in understanding what is and is not true. The main problems with him are his memory, his lack of care at times, and the fact it's hard to tell when he is or is not joking. But still, he is very important. Now, for the first and most important tier of canon, the official manga. Now, some have disagreed with this in the past, mostly people who are only fans of anime and manga. They believe that Toriyama has the power to supersede the manga. However, I can tell you that is fundamentally incorrect from an author's perspective myself. The official manga is the canon in its most pure form. It has been published and distributed, and what the manga says is more important even than Toriyama himself, as it is now out of his hands. Let me give you an example of how the manga is more important. Toriyama himself, when alive, obviously, could not appear in an interview and tell us that Piccolo is actually not Namekian, but he was a Saiyan the whole time. That is like the maker of a blue car looking at the blue car he made, telling us that the car is red. No matter his involvement, that is simply incorrect. We already know Piccolo is a Namekian. He has the racial powers. He was born from King Piccolo. He fuses with Kami, and he is called Namekian throughout the series. He is Namekian officially. There are only two ways Toriyama can change that. One, he could have changed it before it was published, obviously. Or two, he does a recall and a reprint of a new edition with the new lore. Then, and only then, could Piccolo be a Saiyan. And of course, the manga itself, being canon in its purest form, is above the anime and the guidebooks as well, as one is an adaptation and the other is supplementary material. Let me give one more example, and I'm going to use my gaming and fantasy knowledge here. If any of you are big fans of the Elder Scrolls, with Arena, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, those games made by Bethesda, you have probably heard of the man called Kirkbride. Now, Kirkbride was the main writer and lore maker for Morrowind and was a big voice in the other Elder Scrolls works as well. Most fans consider him the main lore master and voice for the Elder Scrolls world. Well, eventually he left Bethesda for other projects. However, he enjoyed the universe so much, he began a blog where he wrote numerous posts about the lore of Elder Scrolls, and fans ate it up. People in those circles talk about Kirkbride stuff all the time. In fact, there's a term called Kirkbridean just for that. However, despite its popularity, meaning his blog, and despite his role as the main writer for a number of years, pretty much all fans acknowledge that his canonicity of his blog posts are not official canon because Bethesda did not publish it. It doesn't matter how much involvement he had, it can be superseded at any moment by the next release of a game or a DLC or an official book on the subject. And everyone knows this. That's just how canon works. Now, that doesn't mean the stuff that he writes doesn't matter. That just means that they can be replaced at any time, no matter what his previous involvement was, because this stuff is not official published canon. Speaking as an author myself, before a book is published, I have to make the canon work with me. However, after it is published, the balance shifts. It is now my responsibility to work with the canon that now is. Otherwise, the books I have already written do not matter, and their reality is inherently untrustworthy. Okay, now that we've gone over the 4 tiers of canon, being anime canon, guidebooks, Toriyama, and the official manga, let's go into some of the complications and exceptions. Earlier, I said the anime, particularly filler, is mostly non-canon. However, there are aspects of it that aren't in the manga that we can't just throw away, because Toriyama was sometimes in the studio and helped to do some designs or art for the anime. Here's a good example. In episodes 93, 94, and 95 of Dragon Ball Z, at least the uncut version, The Ginyu Force are invited to King Kai's planet and fight Tien, Yamcha, and Chaozu. This does not happen in the manga. And for many years, people dismissed it as simply non-canon. And it's certainly not in what I would consider Tier 1 of canon. And even past the fact it is not in the manga, people were always skeptical that Tien, Yamcha, and Chaozu would even have gained enough strength in the rough months since their death, and with less than a week with King Kai, to be able to put up a fight against the Ginyu Force. However, you then find out that Toriyama himself worked on the art for the episode and was present in the studio while it was being created, which means that the creator of the series not only did not find it inherently wrong, but he actively helped in its making. And then that makes you think about if it is possible for them to gain that much strength in such a short amount of time. And then you think about how, when Piccolo was wished back, Nail, whose strength is most likely around the strength of the Ginyu Force, was impressed with Piccolo's great strength himself, even though he was only at King Kai's for a super short amount of time as well. And all of these facts together, meaning Toriyama's involvement, coupled with it supported by a soft feat in the manga, means that while it might not be manga canon, or like pure canon, it has what I call plausibility. And if I had to put it into a tier of canon, at least when discussing the strength of Tien, Yamcha, and Chaozu, I would put it in like tier 3 or 3.5. And of course, we also have to talk about statements versus feats, and according to tier 2 and tier 1 with Toriyama and the manga. Now, I explained this a bit in my video on if Yamcha did or did not cheat, but it's more apt to explain it in this video. Statements tend to be the best source of information we have for much of the series. A character or Toriyama says something, and generally that's a great way to interpret accurate information. However, context is very important as well, and you always need to look at feats before just going with statements. Now, there are hard feats, and there are soft feats. A hard feat is what a character does, and a soft feat is how a character acts. A hard feat is Piccolo's special beam cannon killing both Raditz and Goku. We see it happen, and we know from that the special beam cannon can raise Piccolo's power level to the point he can kill Raditz. However, beforehand, we saw a number of soft feats that already confirmed this, such as when Piccolo fired his first beam and Raditz dodged it rather than caught it. And another time is when Raditz was clearly scared of getting hit by something with a power level of 1330. This tells us that, even though no one states it, that Raditz's power level is below 1330, and that the special beam cannon is more powerful than the Kamehameha that Goku used. And we can surmise that without being told and without the beam killing Raditz. Now, some of you might point out that Raditz dodging the first beam is a hard feat because it's something Raditz does rather than acts, but his dodging is not a hard feat for the beam killing him. That only occurs when the beam does kill him. However, Raditz dodging is a hard feat for his speed because he does dodge it, which lets us know he is faster than the beam. Another example of a soft feat right by that is Piccolo's reaction to the dodge, as he is amazed Raditz could move that fast. That is a soft feat, showing us that the special beam cannon must move very fast to Piccolo's eyes, as he acts like it is impossible to dodge. And Raditz dodging it is a hard feat, showing us that he can dodge it. Okay, here's 2 more quick examples. Very quick. A hard feat is Frieza blowing up Planet Vegeta, letting us know he can destroy planets. A soft feat is Vegeta attempting to use his Gallic gun to blow up Earth. Obviously, Goku stops him, but he acts as if he can. So from a soft feat, we can surmise he has the strength to destroy a planet as well. Simple. I hope that all made sense. Now, I need to acknowledge that this is all for the original Dragon Ball series. It is not for Dragon Ball Super or the movies or the OVAs. With the 13Z movies, and I'm not counting Battle of Gods or ROF in those, because even though they are marketed as Dragon Ball Z, they were shown during the Super era. But with the 13Z movies, they're non-canon. Though just like Tier 4 with anime canon, Toriyama did sometimes help, and we can add some plausibility to the existence of a few aspects of them, like the character Cooler. Toriyama designed him, and in other works made by Toriyama, Cooler is mentioned. So while his movies might not be canon, his existence in canon is plausible. Now for Super. As I've said before, I'm not an expert on Super. My friend Clearin is way more informed about Super than I am, and one reason why the canonicity of Super is hard to determine is because Super did not start with the manga, nor with the original creator of the series. I mean, he let them do it, but it did not start with him. Super started with the anime, and so Super's anime being the blueprint for the series means that it has more canonicity than the original Dragon Ball anime series because that was an adaptation. However, Toriyama and Toyotaro, Toriyama's successor, worked on the manga together, so the creator working on the manga ups the canonicity of the manga as well. And so now we have anime canon and manga canon that seem to both have a near equal measure of plausibility. And then when you include Battle of Gods, ROF, and the Super movies, all of which Toriyama wrote himself, now for some arcs we have 3 different versions of the exact same thing happening. And I have no earthly idea which is more canon than the other. So even if I was a bigger fan of Super, I would not know where to begin deciphering what is or is not true in the canon of that. And while I have no doubt there have been many opinions on that, I myself don't know who or what to trust on it. And if I ever cared to find out, I need to have a long discussion with my friend Clearin. And a few other people probably too. Okay, that is about all I have to say today about the canon of Dragon Ball. But speaking of Clearin, I'm going to link his Twitter in the description in case you want to follow him. I think I've talked about Dragon Ball with him more than anyone else since 2009, and he's a funny guy who memes and posts a lot of cool Dragon Ball facts. So follow him if you'd like to. Who knows, you might see my main as well. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Remember to check the community tab on my channel, please, because there's usually updates on there. And thanks for always being cool. Remember, your subs, likes, and comments are always welcome. Okay guys, see ya.